Antanil Tulian Meldanine, and thank you once again for joining me. My name is Lord Aramil, and today we will be going over, once again, religion in D&D. And specifically, why would you worship a deity in D&D? 1 second. And I am joined momentarily by Louie. Yes. Look at this baby. Look at this baby. No wonder there are so many cat deities throughout history and throughout fiction. Oh, precious. Look at his little tucks. Look at his little tucks. Be amazed. Drop a like for Louie. That's right. He even has a little milk mustache. He's very confused. Cheers. Now then, why would you worship a deity in D&D? Well, the first and most obvious reason is if you are a cleric or a paladin, it's because that deity gives you spells or other holy abilities. It's pretty default, I should say. Now, a cleric or a paladin doesn't have to necessarily worship a deity. They can worship an abstract ideal. I've heard of paladins devoted to law or goodness, or both even. I think I've once heard of a paladin of chivalry that just kind of had such a fervent belief in the ideals of chivalry that they got magical powers, which is some Galahad shit if I've ever heard it. Clerics also can be just devoted to abstract ideals, but honestly it's a lot rarer than actual deities. Let's see. Now, if we can get through this pretty quickly, I'll also go over the Forgotten Realms Pantheon in greater detail. But up until then, why do people worship deities? Well, first and foremost, people like the idea of somebody watching over them. Just in general. That goes for in-game and out-of-game. Humans psychologically enjoy feeling that they're being watched over. Like somebody has got their back. Alright, that's just normal. You could make the case on why. I personally believe it's because we are not pack animals, but we are cultural animals. We are social animals. We like having others for the protection that it brings, and among other things. And having a deity watch over us is just another person, who's got our backs. Hello, Teru. Now, the deities of D&D, by and large, would get more worshippers than historically, mainly because they're tangible. You can see the effects of the deities generally through their intermediaries, be that clerics, paladins, etc. Now, not every, hamlet will have a cleric or even much in the way of a temple. But there is probably a shrine there, and there's probably somebody who has studied that deity's religious text, who comes in, maybe it's old Farmer Joe, who's also got a spiritual side, and, has memorized the agricultural deities' holy words. And he'll come in every Sunday, and people can leave full offerings, and maybe he'll preach, whatever. That's about as basic as you can get. Now, beyond that, in a very meta way, I like to reward good roleplay, and religious religious characters who aren't clerics or paladins is an awfully rare occurrence, I gotta say. So, people who can show just a little bit of devotion, just a little bit of this, that, the other, that's good roleplay. That is good roleplay. Maybe, while you're in town, your fighter will go off and visit the local temple to war deity X, or maybe the deity of strength. Let's see. Maybe what's good? Druids, while not as religious as other divine casters, are in fact, they are divine casters, and they channel nature's magic. Jeez. Sorry, Louis just made like a 4-foot jump. Very nice. Stuck landing. And they probably at least respect the deities of nature, and could quite possibly worship them. Now, there is a practical side to this in a lot of D&D campaigns, is what happens to your character when they die. Now, this isn't the same in all campaign settings. In the Eberron campaign setting, basically all souls go to Dolur, which is kind of this gray, meh plane. It kind of sucks, I'm not gonna lie. Followers of the Silver Flame basically get absorbed into the Silver Flame itself. And there are a few other beliefs. Let's see. Sorry. Trying to get through conversations also. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So in Eberron, it's a bit little. Well, temples are less powerful, honestly. Yeah. In many ways. Sorry, Louis is just running all over the place. I am so terribly distracted. This might be a shorter episode. But let's see here. So, yeah. The temples are less powerful because in Eberron, the deities are less present. Pretty straightforward. But in other places, you might see the effects of the deity more prominently and have to deal with your deity after dying. I think in the more or less typical setting, what happens is that the soul of the person will depart the body. They will go to kind of this neutral area, and then the servants of your deity, if you are a good follower, will then come and pick you up and take you to the appropriate afterlife to be with your deity or do whatever your deity does on their home plane. And if you were not a good worshiper. If you were faithless or what have you, uh, generally either you fade from existence or you might get snatched up by dark powers. And nobody wants that. So, that's a reasonably good reason just to have some form of worship. It's good incentive, if you will. Nobody wants to be snatched up by demons and devils, so you might want to just worship them. In some campaign settings, there are benefits to having a patron deity. Uh, let's see. I'm very distracted today, and I'm terribly sorry. I did research too. I'm all over the place today. I'm sorry. Centered. Okay. What we got here? Oh, the stream's not even terribly healthy. Wow. It's just garbage. Ugh. Okay. So, deities provide benefits, and not all of them are like spellcasting. A common faith can help bind a community together. Your average tiny little hamlet in Thorpe will probably have a little kitty. Oh, goodbye, kitty. Will have a patron deity or something similar. So, going back to our hamlet with Farmer Joe, if they're in the Forgotten Realms pantheon, they probably have a small shrine to Shantea, who is kind of this, not quite a deity of nature anymore. It's kind of the deity of the world and of the balance between wilderness and agriculture and etc. So it's you'd have that, and almost everyone, all the farmers, that's for sure, would pay a little bit of lip service or what have you to Shantea. Cool. Let's see. In a larger settlement, you might have a few different shrines. So once you get up to a larger thorpe, you might have a couple shrines. But once you get into like towns, you might have a small temple. Lathander or Pelor are usually a good choice for the wide variety of people who aren't directly farmers. Sorry. Let's see. So Lathander, good for people who aren't necessarily farmers. It's kind of the middle of the middle grounds, as far as if you ever need like a default deity that somebody will worship, it's probably going to be just your run of the mill god of the sun, because you really can't go wrong with that. Craftsmen will often either have a deity directly related to their craft, or we're going to keep using Forgotten Realms because why not? It's what I've been reading recently. You might have a Temple of Gond, where all the craftsmen go, and that's where they worship. They try and gain inspiration, and those kinds of things. The larger the settlement, the more likely there is to be a multitude of temples. I think Waterdeep has close to a dozen, and it's one of the largest cities in the Forgotten Realms. I'm not going to say it's the largest. It's the largest I can think of off the top of my head, but I'm not as familiar with Forgotten Realms as I am with other settings, specifically ever. But I like Forgotten Realms because it is close to D&D default. So you can make a lot of nice assumptions about your average D&D world through Forgotten Realms. So, religion, like I mentioned, brings a community together. It gives it a common culture. In areas where there are multiple deities that have been worshipped for a long time, you can expect to see people following multiple deities. Going back to our town with... we'll invent a town, okay? It's a small town, largely agricultural, but pretty solid middle class. So we'll give them 3 deities. We've got Shantea, because of all of the pastoral nature and farming. We'll give them Lathander, god of the sun, because this is a relatively good aligned town. And we'll give them Gone. Maybe there's a lot of craftsmen. Solid. So you could expect a lot of overlap between Lathander and the other 2 deities. Your average farmer would probably pay respects to both. Now, this really depends on your setting, but there might not be a specific day of the week that these deities have special reverence for. Like, for Christianity, you got your Sundays where you all get dressed up and go to church. That may or may not be the case for any specific deity. A lot of deities would just be, on this day of the year, they have a holy day, and that's when you go to the temple. Or you go to the temple when you want to pray, when you have time, especially. And you might have a much smaller shrine that maybe you and a couple friends set up out in the field, we'll say, for the Shantea, where you might leave a few stalks of wheat. Like, please give us more of this. But you get a lot of overlap between people who would pray to Shantea and pray to Lathander. Also because of Lathander's job as god of the sun, you get a little bit of weather in there, and like, oh, please don't, burn us alive, please. And in town, you would see a greater preponderance of Gond worshippers, even if they're just small time. But basically, those who work with their hands, but not in a farming way. So, all of your craftsmen, the blacksmith, leather workers, all these people would probably pay some sort of homage to Gond, and also probably just Lathander. If nothing else, Lathander would be a... what's a good term for it? The worship of another deity does not necessarily impede the worship of the first deity. In a lot of cases, it's just another time to have a festival. So, dope. Lots of people have no issues fitting in an extra deity to get another holy day. It's a good time. Oh, so we talked about some cultural reasons. We talked about roleplay reasons. We talked about some spiritual reasons, aka what happens when you fight it eventually. And all these are really good reasons for a player character to worship a deity. And it can make, like I mentioned, for really good roleplay. Especially if it's a deity that your class is not specifically known for, that can be fun. Like, let's say you're playing a fighter who was raised in a farming village. You're probably not necessarily going to worship Cord. You might just worship the deity of agriculture. Because that's what you were raised for. You grew up listening to the rites and the sermons and the rituals for this deity. So you're going to keep doing that, even though it might not actually affect you in the day-to-day. You might just be doing this whole adventuring thing effectively part-time. That would actually be a really interesting character. Imagine if you had a seasonal adventurer. So during the off-season, you are adventuring, and the rest of the year, you're just a farmer. I kind of want to make that now. Shoot, that's a pretty clever idea. Huh. So there, you can steal that idea, I guess. Oh. Yeah, this is... I guess this episode is really falling into the Aramil's musing, because I'm just kind of thinking and coming up with a lot of good things. Oh, Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper is a good thing. Now then. Oh, cool. Trying to keep an eye on my analytics also for the stream. So let me know in the chat if there's an issue. I should probably pop out the chat just because otherwise sometimes it goes a bit wonky. And the last thing we need is wonky chat, right? Right. How do we even... There we go. Cool. Now, what are some other deities? Now, despite our example right there with the farmer fighter, a lot of adventurers will have a specific deity that appeals to them. Again, we're going to go with the Forgotten Realms, mainly because I really breezed over them super fast last episode, last podcast, whatever you want to call it. So this is kind of to help make up for it. I don't think I'm going to go just straight through the player's handbook like this class worships this class worships this. No. Instead, I'm going to pick a couple examples and talk about them. First up, Azuth is actually a pretty quick and easy example. Man, Louis just running all over the place. Jumping. So Azuth is a deity of magic, one of several, actually, in the Forgotten Realms. And he focuses mainly on, codified magic. So he works well as a patron to, wizards. So the first deity is best for the last class. Really quickly here, of course, clerics will be for everyone, so don't even have to worry about that. All of the different races have their own sets of deities, which I really enjoy. That's really uncommon. Well, it is not common enough, let's say. Oh, what's a good one? Do not claw on that. Okay, Ogma. Ogma is a reasonably good example. Yeah, the Lord of Knowledge, Binder of what is known. Yeah, he's kind of a bard. It's for bards, honestly. See you later, but I don't know. I probably should just. Yeah. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to make this a very short episode, just a really quick blip, and then next week I'll go into full detail of the Forgotten Realms Pantheon. I don't want to shortchange it too badly. So, please leave a like, give me a comment, and what do you think would be the most interesting combination for a, well, what would be your favorite deity to worship?